Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. For each week, we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Higher Ed Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 270, with Christine Lucer from Minerva Project. I've chatted with her a few times, always appreciate our conversations, and just really appreciate all that Minerva Project is doing to kind of help model the way and also, work with institutions to elevate the way that they are building out their teaching and learning, bringing in kind of the best of both worlds of in-person experiential learning and online learning, and kind of elevating the way that we're building tools to teach online. So a lot of great things that we covered in this conversation. I feel like we crammed in a lot of really good stuff in a pretty relatively short amount of time here about how kind of to build higher ed's hybrid experiential future, and also how AI is driving education reform and impacting the work of professionals in this space. So just really amazing episode. Always feel very inspired whenever I talk with anybody from Minerva, but certainly do really appreciate Christine's time and all that she shared. So definitely connect with her, keep the conversation going, and check out Minerva. But without further ado, please do enjoy this episode number 270 with Christine Lucer. I'm really excited to have you on. I know we kind of crossed paths, as we're recording this a few months ago at Tech Week in New York City, and just your perspective and certainly just being a part of Minerva, I really much kind of respect, your work, the work that the entire team there does, just sort of really kind of thinking big, thinking differently about like the potential of higher education, like what it can achieve. But just in case folks aren't as intimately aware as I am of Minerva, because I know there's the Minerva Project and Minerva University, I guess, what is the way that you kind of, easily and quickly explain, what Minerva does through those two entities and kind of how your role fits in to that kind of greater ecosystem?
Starting off with the easy questions. I think I can handle this one. Minerva is a mission-driven organization that was founded over a decade ago, and its mission is to nurture critical wisdom for the sake of the world. And what we're really trying to do is to make humans more thoughtful, more critical, and more creative. We're trying to do that in a systematic way. We think the world needs more leaders, and we think that higher education is the best chance to do that. But it really requires doing education in a way that is evidence-based. And one of the challenges that I have as a neuroscientist is if you knew everything about the way that the brain learned and said, well, let's just do none of that, that's what a lot of school would look like. So Minerva was founded to nurture critical wisdom for the sake of the world. The first thing we did was build Minerva University from scratch. It has a really differentiated, cohesive learning model and a really unique travel experiential model. It's a 4-year degree program. When it got accreditation in 2021 from WASC, there's sort of an organizational split. If you'd been there for a while, you had the privilege of picking if you were going to keep shepherding the university into its next chapter, or if you were going to try to expand that mission by taking what we learned building Minerva University and working with other universities around the globe to help them rethink their student learning journeys. And as much as I love Minerva University and I miss teaching the students there, I am at heart a builder and I wanted to scale impact. So I went the partnerships direction.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really exciting to see is like, obviously, there could be a lot of like concepts where it's like, hey, just like take our word for it. Like we've done our like homework on that. Like, you have obviously like you and all of your colleagues like firsthand sort of experience with like, building it, seeing its impact, seeing that it really works out, and now having that opportunity to not just sort of like hog it yourself kind of thing. Like that's something where it's just like I have a lot of admiration and respect that like, 'cause I think there is maybe like a alternate universe darkest timeline where it's just like, we figured it out. Now we're going to like, use it just for our own benefit and gain or whatever. So we're starting to see this sort of the ripple effect of sort of this, role modeling that you're doing for the rest of kind of the higher ed space, like across the entire world, which is really amazing. So for our show, obviously we talk a lot about kind of the digital transformation, kind of digital sort of aspect of a lot of what's happening in higher ed. So given everything that you've been doing over the past several years with all of the entities of Minerva, what is your perspective on the need for higher ed right now to sort of right size their physical and digital footprints? Because I mean, you mentioned like the travel pieces and sort of experiential and all that. It's the idea of like, clearly there's sort of like a best of both worlds out there that certainly is going to look different for each institution. But like, just sort of like, what's your perspective on like, there is a place for leveraging great digital tools, but also really great sort of like physical experiences for students?
I think what you just nailed was it looks different for every institution. And I think that at the core, institutions need to be more purposeful and efficient with both their physical infrastructure and their digital infrastructure. There's no ideal ratio in the vacuum. It really comes down to knowing what your institution wants to be, the students it wants to serve, and then saying, how can we make the humans we want to make through the experiences we give to those students? And then you can look at those goals and say, let's backwards plan the experiences people have to have in the physical world and in the digital world to really make sure that we're achieving our goals. So MU is interesting because they have a very intentional and intensive in-person experience. They all live together in dormitory-style housings, but they're all buildings that we're renting on behalf of the students so that they can have that in-person community. When they show up for class, it's in a virtual classroom that was purpose-built to use learning analytics and behavioral science to nudge students and faculty towards active, engaged learning. So that does something positive for the learning experience. It also cuts down on the costs because we're not paying for buildings that have faculty offices in them or classrooms that sit empty for a third, if not more, of the year. And so really thinking creatively about if we could start from scratch, what would make sense has been something that has been really important in building Minerva University. Now, you also asked about partnerships, and that's going to look different for each one. I mean, schools have campuses. They want to bring people together. And then it's a question of how do you leverage that space for something that you couldn't do otherwise? And I think one thing I see a lot of is I could have watched this lecture online. So like, why did I have to show up in this building at this time? Like, there are digital tools that should take the lecture out of the classroom. And there are digital tools that you can bring into the classroom to make it more engaging. So Minerva is really focused on that custom-built design of a program and then that custom technology that's going to help make the learning experience much more engaging and much more interactive.
Now, I guess as a sort of distilled down, loaded question as a follow-up here, I think in my mind, it is the idea that like most institutions probably need to downscale their physical footprint and upgrade, update, modernize their like digital footprint. What's sort of your take on that? Because like you said, it's like there's ways to use digital tools to facilitate, classroom experiences that can maybe be more effective. And then like, you have these like buildings and things that are like vacant half the time. Obviously, that's like maybe oversimplifying. I'll certainly acknowledge that. But like, I guess it's that idea of like, if you can start to show people a different way, then they'll maybe just sort of like reflect and start to do that self-examination of like, oh, okay, yeah, like for us, we do need to do more of this and less of that and all that. But like, I guess like to kind of boil down sort of what you're saying, like, and I guess I'll put a finer point on this. What are the ways that you think, like, what are the opportunities on the sort of digital front that you think institutions could and should be looking into to sort of just improve their student experience?
It's a really fantastic question. And I think it comes down to how do we know what people are doing as learners throughout their entire experience? And what we have right now is a bunch of institutions that have really big competencies. Liberal arts education is teach you to think critically, to be creative, to communicate well, to collaborate. All of these things are really nice goals. And then you say, where do you do that and how do you do it? Can you point to where this is in your curriculum or in your student experience? And that becomes a little tricky for institutions to do. And it tends to come down to, well, they took a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that. So at its core, there's a design issue in terms of how you make a more cohesive student experience. But then there's the question of how do you track if you're actually delivering on that design? And this is where technology can be really helpful. To give you a concrete example, let's imagine we all agreed that we wanted to teach the 4 C's, but we said, those are really hard, big concepts. I don't know how to operationalize it. I don't know how to score students on it. I'm going to break it down into, let's call them 35 different learning outcomes. If I have a piece of technology that asks my faculty to say, here's the syllabus, these are the institutional learning outcomes that I'm going to teach in this class. These are the session plans I'm going to run. These are the activities that exist in the sessions. These are the assignments. And you're actually using technology to track that and then give students frequent formative feedback. What a massive benefit for a university to be able to say, like, we're foregrounding this for students, we're foregrounding it for our faculty, and then we're showing evidence of you actually doing activities that are making you better at these skills. So that's where I think technology can be really powerful, is both in the planning side and in the implementation and the impact side.
Yeah, that's definitely where my mind was going. Is it like, again, this sort of like piece, I think, traditionally for institutions of just a lot of sort of like, just trust us, like we're doing what we say we're doing. And, you know, maybe in sort of a reactive or kind of after the fact area, it's like, well, I had all the plan in my head or written down somewhere, I could show you or whatever. Like, it's not at the foreground. It's not easily tracked, certainly not in real time or anything else. Like, you can just sort of try to get so much more insight into, I mean, certainly like what you're kind of in for as a student, but then like, as time goes on, the student kind of sees their progress. And then also, like, I'd imagine, like, for faculty members and stuff too, they could see kind of insights and things. Like, I'm just seeing a lot of like improvements with like, you know, learning management systems and so many different things where like you can make like pivots to be like, it seems like students are struggling here. Maybe I need to spend more time here versus somewhere else. And the other thing that like is just popping in my mind too is that like in my current role, like kind of my day job, in addition to all that, like we are using a sort of AI sidekick note taker for like, you know, video calls and everything. And it like pops up while you're on there and is like tracking like me as the host, like how much time am I talking? Like it's sort of being like, okay, you've spent like, you know, 60% of the time like monologuing, like maybe you should like take a step back. So like just those sort of things, I'm just like, oh yeah, like those should be things that are like giving like a faculty member real-time feedback on, hey, you're talking too much, or like this person's talked too much, you know, another student, something else. Like it's an idea of like real-time pivots and like real-time insights. And yeah, then like, you know, certainly on the tail end, like quantifying the impacts and those sort of things. So like, I guess my mind's definitely swirling a lot of like, those are where there's some really great opportunities where I think it's even just like, you know, with the sort of like AI note taker or sidekick, whatever, like something that's sort of like augmenting you in the moment teaching, it's like a relatively simple thing. But then once you're sort of doing it, every faculty, every class, every time, like you are just sort of like getting sort of a compounding kind of benefit for your institution.
You said so many different things that can send me down so many different paths. But the one, no, it's great. Yeah. The one thing I will say is that cohesion is remarkably powerful. So Minerva looks at curricular innovation in terms of 3 big things that we think can move the needle. And the first one is, how do you create that language of skills, that learning taxonomy? And it should not be the 4 C's. That is too broad to help anyone. And it can't be like Lightcast library of 32,000 skills. That's too much for anybody to manage. But thinking about what the 25, 35, 75 skills that you want all humans to graduate knowing is really important. And you want to speak that language in community. Once you know what those skills are, you can say, hey, what are the active learning exercises we're going to give people to give them multiple opportunities to practice these skills across contexts? Because if you've picked them well to be durable and transferable, they should be useful, at least some subset of them, in a marketing class as well as in a biology class. I can cater to my audience's perspective in both. I can realize that causation does not equal correlation in both. I can distinguish a fact from a claim in both, right? And so what students are getting, if you do that well, is lots of practice and lots of feedback on why those skills are useful and relevant in specific disciplines. And the reason this is important from a neuroscience perspective is like you say, okay, this is what the skill looks like right now. And then you put it down for a while and you're like, actually, over here, when you use that skill, it looks a little bit different. And then you put it down for a while and you're getting this spaced practice. And every time I have to do this without dumping the coffee in my lap, it starts to look a little bit different. And what that's doing is it's setting up students to be agile thinkers when they are out in the wild. We're not able to prepare them for every experience they'll face, but we can do a much better job of saying, I've shown you why this tool is useful across context. So when you're out in that unstructured environment, they will have a sense of when to pick up a certain tool and start applying it. So we're really thinking about a curriculum of skills across disciplines as a way to build those habits. And this is where I think your point about everybody taking a similar approach is really unique and really innovative. Because I used to think that if we could wave a magic wand and we could just make faculty care more about teaching and they knew all the high-impact practices, everything would be fixed. But even if you did that and we're all still talking in silos, all the arrows are going in these crazy different directions and we're missing out on the opportunity to help students think across fields, which is really what they need in a world that's increasingly complex.
Yeah, well, I guess just to make it clear why I mean, like, certainly talking to you, we've talked about this kind of stuff before, but then, like, when I talk with folks from Minerva and just talk about, like, what you all are doing, the juices start going and start geeking out. It's great stuff. Because I think, like, even with what you're saying, sort of the, like, that idea of kind of an ambiguous, world out there of like you hopefully are giving folks opportunities to practice. Like that's the whole sort of like if you're getting the best of the other side of like the physical, opportunities and everything, hopefully you're being really intentional about doing all this stuff on the digital side and then, giving those like really, kind of smart and relevant experiential learning opportunities. But
to that, I think one thing that you're saying about this physical and digital divide is all of those practice experiences can happen in a physical classroom. Mm-hmm. But when you're really intentional about how do we give students that amount of feedback, how do we make sure they see that it's useful over here and over there, that's a really complicated spreadsheet for every student. And so you need a technology tool that's going to help faculty know what those shared learning outcomes are, come up with activities that are going to help them highlight it, and give them a really easy way to provide feedback on those learning outcomes. And then students can open that up and they can see, oh, Dustin gave me like a 3 out of 5 on my application of this learning outcome over here, but I got a 1 in this other class. And that means I kind of get why it's useful here, but I need more practice there. And so that's where it comes back to using these tools intentionally to surface learning outcomes and provide evidence of them. Faith in higher ed is tanking because we haven't done a great job of creating a return on investment that's obvious to students. And I don't mean like, did you make a lot of money when you left? It means, did I come out being able to clearly articulate what I learned and feel like I'm empowered to make change in the world? And I think if you were 22 years old and you said, I learned 35 things really, really well. I learned 72 things really, really well. I talk about them. I use them. They've become habits. That's a return on investment.
I think if you get too overly focused on like, okay, we're going to, graduate people who are going to make a lot of money and all that, it's like, I don't know, that's sort of like a fool's errand to a point, but it's like, it will be an outcome if you are graduating people like who are well equipped with the skills, because it's like, they're going to get good jobs and keep them and be successful in those jobs. And like,
100%.
So, yeah.
I think this idea of like, we have to get people good jobs, it would be very privileged of me to be like, that's not the point of education. Like, yes, people have to get good jobs, but the reason they should get good jobs is because we have made them thoughtful, smart, kind people, right? We've like cultivated a humanness in them that makes them able to go out into the world of work and be successful. It's not just, are you a cog in a machine? And I think I have seen people weaponize that. Like, we're not here to make like people who can work at Google. And I agree, but we're here to make good humans who can thrive in the world they will inherit. And that means they're probably useful to companies.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like it's only like one layer deeper. Like, it's not like we're getting like really crazy sort of esoteric kind of things. It's just like, because it's like, oh, we want to, get graduates that are gainfully employed. It's like, yes, I agree. Well, how do you do that? It's like, well, they got to have like good skills that are relevant, whatever, like, and even the idea of like the durable skills sort of piece of like, I feel like you'll kind of drive yourself nuts if it is the idea of like, well, they need to learn this like one thing. And it's like things change a lot. Like if you're overly focused on a thing that is like a very timely, it's connected to this one company, it's like, integrate that to the extent that it makes sense. But if the kind of majority of what a learner is able to gain and verify through their experience that feels durable, it's all this stuff that I think, again, anybody would agree is important for education to foster in students. It's like that is the stuff that's going to help you to just be a good person, be a good citizen, be a good employee. So I think it's just like kind of taking a different angle on what I think is sort of the core of what everybody would agree. Like we're all here to sort of help, achieve and everything. So
wait, can I tell you about my dream?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So the thing that is really fascinating about durable transferable skills and why it connects to Minerva's mission of nurturing critical wisdom is like, wisdom is what you get by bumping into stuff throughout life. Like you and I are some age, we have had experiences, we've made sense of them. Some of them we've done a good job making sense of them, and some of them we hadn't. But when I try to teach adults about durable transferable skills, like, oh yeah, I get it, but I don't usually think to apply it, or I don't have a lot of practice doing that because I don't remember when it's relevant. But over time, we messily acquire what we would think of as wisdom. And I just look back and I say, like, what would have happened if somebody tried to teach me these skills intentionally when I was 18? Like, would I have missed out on some pain? Like, maybe that would have been helpful in some ways. And I think you do need that experiential kind of stumbling, but it can happen in a structured way so you can do it more efficiently later. And that's what I think a real skills-based education's advantage is that you're giving people structured heuristics and frameworks to make their ability to do stuff in the world better.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah, I feel like we, again, with sort of my forming of sort of like the question, sort of thinking about this is the idea of like, there absolutely is, because certainly Minerva is helping to model the way of like, the best of both worlds, sort of hybrid kind of education, that even I think like we said, for each institution is going to be different. I think from like each semester, each year, I could just sort of like modulate a little bit and just trying to get kind of the best experiential opportunities to like test out skills and sort of test out, organizations, industries, and different things like that. And that like, even the idea of like technology, just, there's times when there is going to be opportunities to be sort of like wholly embracing, digital education and having instruction happen there. But then sort of like even just across the board, just making sure everything's sort of like supplemented, in the right way to say like, okay, you're doing this sort of, in-person experiential learning opportunity. How do we, capture your reflections or discussions or reinforce things, in, learning management system or, wherever else. But so, yeah, I'm very optimistic. I'm very excited that like, there are folks like, Minerva and the institutions that you work with and a lot of other institutions that are really kind of grappling with this, and that we'll start to see very clear and very successful examples of trying to get kind of the best of both worlds and use kind of, the best in market ed tech tools and create these really great sort of experiential learning, partnerships and opportunities and, just a lot of different options for students versus maybe being where it's like, well, we kind of have this one for this one program over here, but then like everybody else kind of has to do without or something. So
one of the beautiful things about what you just said is that you can increase flexibility if you're leveraging tools well. But one of the places where I think people are going to mess things up with AI is that we're going to be so flexible that we are incoherent, and we're going to be so personalized that we're down rabbit holes. And this is why I think having that language of durable and transferable skills is so important, is that once you have that, we have a shared language. And it doesn't matter if you're studying some rabbit hole and I'm studying some other one, if we come back together and say, this is where the overlap is. And if you don't have that shared language, flexibility creates incoherence. And if you do have that shared language, we can all go off on our personal learning paths, but we know we're focused on the same skills and trying to accomplish the same things. And then we can all work together in community. Like brains don't learn by themselves very well. They learn when things are useful for getting stuff done in the world with other people. And this is why collaboration is so important inside of a classroom, and using that language to create commonality between us is where I think we're going to get the benefits of flexibility without the drawbacks of incoherence.
I think that is a good, I don't know, just sort of like warning, I guess, of almost like the pitfalls of the traps of like, almost like over personalization or something if it's not, again, done sort of in a, I guess, like curated way, I guess is sort of the word I'm thinking of. The idea of like, there maybe still needs to be some bounds to, again, like, this is what we want you to learn. Like, we want you to end up here. Certainly there could be some kind of windy paths, but like, as long as you're, getting there, because it's even just the idea of like anymore, if you have like, all your kind of learning assets in the LMS, it could be like, well, I needed to watch that video like 20 times to have it like really kind of stick with me. You watched it once and you're like, oh yeah, I got that. I've heard this before. I've seen it before, whatever, So it's like, even those, like, that's sort of like the first baby step in that direction. And then, yeah, AI is sort of like, kind of banging on the gate and the door of just being like, well, we can just have every learner learn, whatever they want, however they want, whatever. And that's, I think, tempting, I'm sure, for a lot of institutions and everything. And I certainly wanted to kind of do our due diligence here and talk about how AI has, or you envision maybe playing a role in your team's efforts, to sort of reform and elevate higher ed. So how we talked about those sort of like pitfalls, I guess, but are you seeing that there are opportunities for leveraging AI tools of some sort in the work that you are doing currently?
Yes. And I think the real opportunity comes from how it is accelerating the conversation about traditional content-based higher ed being broken. If I can just have people write an essay about a certain topic, and now an AI can do that, it's like, well, is that really an authentic assessment? Maybe. It depends on what I'm grading them on. Am I grading them on the process for iterating on that essay with an LLM? That could actually be a really good experience for the student, and then it could be a really good thing to assess. But largely, we're seeing kind of the breakdown of knowledge recall when a large language model knows almost everything in the entire world. Is me being able to spit stuff back in terms of facts useful? Not really. It's the same argument around Google, but we're increasingly seeing this idea that our job is to go to school to memorize stuff is very broken. And so I think we're saying the right things about teaching people deeper skills, but AI has really pushed it to the forefront of saying, well, why am I here? What is the return on investment? If I'm just going to listen to this person lecture, or I'm just going to listen to ChatGPT tell me a lecture, am I actually learning anything? So I think the biggest way it's helping with the reform of education is kind of showing that the traditional higher education system emperor has no clothes kind of issue. And then in terms of it accelerating work, what large language models are actually quite good at is synthesizing a bunch of qualitative data really quickly. And I think that there's huge opportunities for schools that start to leverage those tools inside of a classroom. And that happens with the planning, it happens with the teaching, and it happens with the assessment. So how might you take a syllabus that you already have? Dustin, what class do you want to teach?
I'm a good like U.S. history kind of guy. I think I would want to teach that. Yeah.
Perfect. So let's say I want to have a university where there's 40 durable transferable skills, and you have been teaching U.S. history for 20 years from the same set of PowerPoints. The first thing I can do is ask an LLM to look at your syllabus and look at your lecture notes and say, hey, which durable transferable skills are Dustin already highlighting? Then that helps cue you in to how to make the experience more coherent with the learning model. I can also ask it to create some interactive assignments, create some engaging activities. It can make people who are stuck in one way a bit more creative on the teaching side and on the planning and activity and active learning side. I think the other thing it can do, and you mentioned this before, is synthesize student answers really quickly. So how might I get real-time feedback if everybody fills out a poll and I can say, oh, here's a point of confusion, or LM thinks this is the best answer. Let's all critique it together. So using it live to create more engaging experiences is really helpful. And then I do worry a bit about faculty using AI to write assignments and students using AI to then do the assignments, and then faculty using AI to grade the assignments. But if you have a coherent model and you know what the shared outcomes are and what the shared rubrics are, it actually does a pretty good job of assessing student work that faculty can then sanity check. So it can help scale feedback in an effective way. So the three things that are really important in making a coherent educational model come to life, skills, pedagogy, assessment, I think it can help on all three fronts.
Yeah, and in my mind, it's just like, because I think I always appreciate sort of the like air of caution or sort of like the encouraging of thoughtfulness and intentionality with this like tool and everything, and not just sort of like handing everything off to it, or like there are great opportunities for using this tool in sort of our everyday work. But then even like with what you're saying, like look at this as an opportunity to reevaluate what you're doing, why, how it could be better, and all that. Like that, it's as higher ed has had many, I guess, in the recent past, like these existential crises or just sort of seismic global events that have like, forced our hand of like, how we do things and why we do them the way we do them. Like, because obviously some people are like burying their heads in the sand or just being like, we're not using it at all. We're never going to use it. There's no place for it. And like, I just think there's opportunities on both fronts of just sort of trying to see if you can rethink what you're doing and then find any place where it can fit in to where like, maybe it is the sort of behind the scenes, as you're teaching or you're doing any sort of like student support work or something, or if it is more at the forefront. But yeah, I'm excited. I mean, like the kind of first point you said of just like that idea of people being like, oh my gosh, well, we have to like reevaluate how we do all of our assignments and whatever else. It's like, yeah, isn't that exciting? Like, isn't that, it's like, it's a good problem to have, if it's just be like, oh my God, they're just going to like get AI to write their essays or write their answer or whatever. It's like, okay, cool. So like, how are we going to try to like get around that, I guess, in my mind? Because it could be like, that could be that sort of like way into rethinking sort of the whole learning experience to be just a little bit more like skills-based or experiential, like any of those kind of things, like could just be more introduced.
This reminds me of a COVID story where I had a bunch of friends who were teaching at institutional, like traditional institutions, and they had to teach on Zoom. They're like, no one listens to me on Zoom. And I was like, no one was listening to you in a classroom if all you're doing is lecturing. You just thought that you could see their faces. And so anything that brings us into a new conceptual environment is a great place to establish new habits. And so the start of a term, great time to start new habits. It's you and a whole new group of students. And if you say, hey, the world's looking a little bit different, we can all establish some new habits and give people guidance on how to use it well. And I think leaders have to do that with faculty, and then faculty have to turn around and do that with students. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, as we wind down, certainly AI is on everyone's minds as sort of just something that is going to be kind of a harbinger of a, has been and will continue to be a harbinger of a new era for higher ed. But are there other things that you are like tracking on the horizon, like specifically for your work or just sort of like in higher ed writ large? Like what's on your mind as we kind of wind down and wrap up the episode? I'll sort of give you the final word here.
We've got two. One is I'm very excited about sub 120 baccalaureate degrees, maybe this college in 3 movement. People are talking about a 90 credit bachelor's degree. I think this is a huge opportunity for schools who are willing to proactively do it because, to your point about establishing a new opportunity, this is a great reason to go back to the drawing board. And I think that schools are going to have a chance, I don't know if they'll all deliver on it, but a chance to demonstrate that 3-year degrees, when they are intentionally designed instead of grown into organic squid monsters like current 4-year degrees, that 3-year degrees are more powerful than 4-year degrees. My worry, though, is that there will be a domino effect where if I'm a student and I'm looking at this and I can go get a 90 credit bachelor's degree or I can go get 120, as soon as one school shows that this is a good thing, students start to go there, and all schools will want to have that, almost like an arms race. And then if they rush to do it, they're going to just gut gen ed, or they're going to gut electives, and they're going to end up with a bad degree, even more watered down. So I think the ability to look at this as a fresh start and say, how can we design more effective and more efficient 90 credit degrees is going to be huge. The second one is, I was at AAC&U and there was this huge focus on comprehensive learner records, which I am super excited about. It's this idea that students need more visibility into the skills that they're learning. But I think that this is complicated because first you have to right size what those skills are. Then you have to make sure students know when those things are actually being introduced to them. And I'm a little worried it'll be kind of like a like an experience collector. It's like, I took this class and somebody said it had this skill, instead of us looking at this as an opportunity to say, hey, what are we teaching and how are we teaching it? And getting students really effective feedback on their development of those skills over time. But anything that can empower students to take more ownership of their journey is great, as long as it's not us abdicating our responsibility to not change anything.
Yeah, I mean, those are two really good things, because I think, like, especially with how you framed them, like, there's still so much kind of like in flux, like we're still kind of figuring them out. And I mean, certainly like there's only things to be gained by rethinking kind of like, 'cause I feel like CLRs are sort of this like really like, I mean, major sort of evolution from like transcripts, the idea of like, well, these are the classes I took and how many credits I got. And it's just kind of this like bureaucratic document. It's like, we could do better than that. We could like have this student have something in hand that captures all those things and all that. So that is really exciting. I think, yeah, there's a lot of folks that are, I don't know, kind of putting their heads together for that. And that'll be exciting to see where that develops. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely also excited about that opportunity that is a sort of presenting itself to rethink the bachelor's degree, make that a little bit more within reach, or kind of, I guess, like distilled down in a sense. Like you said, there are definitely some like pitfalls there of like, let's not just sort of like haphazardly kind of just, cut back things and not kind of realize sort of what we're losing in that process. Because I think there is like, that is a discussion to be had. It's not just sort of like, oh, well, shorter is better, right? Like, or whatever. It's like, well, it depends. Like, and I think that is the idea of like, you might see some like kind of fits and starts here as different institutions approach it in different ways. In that same way where I think there's going to be a lot of different flavors of a, 90 credit, 3-year kind of bachelor's degree and everything. So I think that will be, a likely turbulent process for some institutions to kind of realize, but I do think it's the right conversation to be having. It's the right, direction to be going in. So definitely is exciting stuff to be keeping an eye on. And I think we'll certainly, have ways to connect with you and Minerva in the show notes for the episode here. Just really, appreciate you, appreciate your time, appreciate all that you do. And just always good chatting with you, and appreciate you coming on the show to hang out here.
Thank you, Dustin. I always have such a wonderful time when we talk. This is great.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.